We're going to begin today by starting Chapter 5 in the Laws of Business. We will be discussing the natures and the class of a contract. So then what exactly is a contract? A contract can be a legally enforceable agreement between two or more people. In this video, we will be talking about what exactly makes a contract valid. We will also talk about what types of contracts can be made and what are the different ways that they can be applied. Now let's discuss what makes a valid contract. There are 5 requirements to make a contract valid. It must be a mutual agreement. Competent parties must be involved. There must be a consideration. It must involve a lawful purpose, and it is required to have a paper form. A mutual agreement is somewhat explained by its name. It is an agreement made between two people which both parties agree to the circumstances and the situations. A competent party means that the person is required to be in the right state of mind, to be considered sane, not under the influence, or of any other situation in which will inhibit the person from making the proper decisions when involving in a contract. A consideration is similar to a promise or to an obligation. Examples are the promise to pay someone, or to provide a service, or to provide a product. Each party in a contract is agreeing to form some type of consideration between them. A legal purpose is clearly stated in its name. It is assuring that an agreement made between two people in a contract has a lawful purpose behind it. A proper form just acknowledges that you have all of the proper paperwork and documentation you need to make a contract. Now let's move on to the next subject. As we stated earlier, a contract is a legally enforceable document which binds two parties to an agreement. So a breach of contract is a failure of one of the parties to be able to perform that obligation or promise under that contract. An example of breach of contract in a funeral home is when a funeral director forgets to provide a limousine to the family after discussing and agreeing that this limousine will be provided. Another example of a breach of contract is when a family refuses to pay a funeral home for the services provided. Next, we have a void contract is an agreement with no legal effect, and it is not enforceable in court. An example of a void contract in a funeral home is when a family requests to use the equipment for music or videos, but later on they choose not to use it. The contract in which included the music equipment will be voided. A voidable contract would be enforced by law, but because of circumstances, either one or both parties can choose to void the contract. An example of this in a funeral home would be if an arrangement was made with the family to use the facility, but after some time they chose not to use the facility but an alternate funeral home. This would entitle the contract to be voidable. Now our last section will discuss the several different types of contracts. There are express contracts and implied contracts. An express contract is a contract in which every single word is expressed and written out. An implied contract is similar to a contract that you do not specifically describe what you're going to do, but you're going to do it. So In a sense, it's like actions speak louder than words. An express contract in a funeral home is similar to the contracts that you make during an arrangement meeting. You discuss with the family all of the things that they want and desire for their service, and in that, the contract is made. An example of an implied contract in the funeral home is when the family requests to have a service at a church. It is implied that you're going to make the calls to make that service happen. It is not formally explained that or requested that you call them, but you know you're going to call them. There are also formal contracts and simple contracts. A formal contract is a contract which can be sealed, which basically means it's like an obligation. And a simple contract is any other type of contract. A simple contract can be one that is either written or can be made orally. But for it to be enforceable, it must be written. An example of a formal contract in a funeral home is similar to when you're getting a notary, say for the death certificates or any other situation which in a notary is required. This is a type of formal contract. An example of a simple contract in the funeral home is similar to when the family is making arrangements and request that they be given some personal family time to spend with their loved one. This is an oral contract that the funeral home must follow. Another form of contracts is unilateral contracts and bilateral contracts. A unilateral contract is a contract calling for an act in consideration for a promise. This is typically a contract not made in a funeral home. An example of this is a poster of a lost dog which offers a reward. A bilateral contract is a contract consisting of a mutual exchange of promises. So in the funeral home industry, the funeral director makes arrangements with the family, promising to provide a service for the family, and the family promises to pay the funeral home for the services rendered. Another type of contract is an executory contract and an executed contract. An executory contract is a contract that has not fully been carried out. An executed contract is a contract that has been fully performed. An example of an executory contract in the funeral home would be if a family met with the funeral director to make arrangements, but the service has yet to be carried out. An example of an executed contract in the funeral home is when all services have been rendered and there are no more steps to provide for a service. The final type of contract is a quasi-contract, which is an imposition of rights and obligations without an actual contract. It is very similar to an implied contract. This does conclude today's video. Thank you for watching. You have a great day.